Imagine a 9th century Viking. His world consists of wood, leather, and crude iron. Yet, in his hands, he wields a sword forged from steel, so pure and strong that its mass production in Europe would only become possible 800 years later, during the height of the Industrial Revolution. Picture a warrior from the Great Heathen Army, which invaded England in 865 AD. Most of his comrades fight with swords made from bog iron, brittle and full of impurities. But he has an Ulfberht. This sword shouldn't have existed. It's a technological paradox, an artifact that defies the linear progression of history. And it wasn't a unique item, but an entire series of blades marked with a mysterious signature. Ulfberht was more than just a sword, it was a mark of quality. To date, around 170 such blades have been discovered, scattered from Ireland to the Volga region. All of them bear an inlaid inscription, Plaus v Ulfberht T. The inscription itself was a marvel of craftsmanship. Letters made of twisted Damascus wire were hammered into the red-hot blade, requiring incredible precision. This weapon was lighter, more flexible, and deadlier than any contemporary equivalent. To own such a sword meant absolute superiority on the battlefield. It was akin to the supercar of its era, rare, expensive, possibly worth an entire estate, and technologically unparalleled. For a long time, Ulfberht swords were considered merely very good. The real shock came when modern metallurgists placed them under a microscope. Research, notably by Dr. Alan Williams, revealed that the slag content in Ulfberhts was negligible, whereas in ordinary swords, impurities made up a significant portion of the mass. Analysis showed that the blades were forged from crucible steel with a carbon content of about 1.2%. For scientists, this was akin to finding a microchip in Tutankhamun's tomb. The technology for their creation simply did not exist in medieval Europe. This anomaly presents us with two fundamental questions that will form the basis of our exploration. The first is technological. How did they manage to create steel 8 centuries ahead of its time? And the second is historical. Who was behind the name Ulfberht? Was it a single brilliant inventor? Or was it the name of an entire corporation, a brand guaranteeing exceptional quality? To answer these questions, we must first understand the world of fire and iron in which it was born. The Viking Age was not just a time of brutal raids. It was an era of unprecedented expansion. In their longships, Scandinavians traveled from North America to Baghdad, forging a global network of trade and exchange. In this world, a sword was more than just a weapon. It was an extension of the warrior, a symbol of his status, honor, and even his soul. Great blades were given their own names, becoming family heirlooms passed down through generations. The standard European sword of that time was a product of bloomery technology. Iron ore was heated with charcoal in a clay furnace that barely reached 1200 degrees Celsius. What emerged from the furnace was not an ingot, but a porous, impure lump of metal, a bloom. Imagine a metallic sponge saturated with glass and impurities. Blacksmiths would hammer it for hours, folding and forge welding layers to attempt to purify the metal and impart strength. This process created beautiful patterns on the blade but didn't solve the core problem. The blades remained brittle and unreliable. In battle, such a sword could be a death sentence for its owner. It would bend upon striking a shield, or worse, snap at the most critical moment. Sagas even recount warriors in the heat of battle having to place a foot on a bent blade to straighten it, leaving themselves vulnerable for precious seconds. Steel quality was a lottery. A warrior could never be entirely confident in their primary weapon. Against the backdrop of this widespread problem, the Ulfberht stands out as a technological revelation. It neither bent nor broke. It was capable of cleaving chainmail and staying sharp much longer. Modern tests show that an Ulfberht could cut through a typical sword of that era with hardly any damage. Even its sound was different. A clear, high ring, not the dull clang of soft iron. In the hands of a skilled warrior, it transformed into an ultimate weapon. This was more than just an improvement. It was a qualitative leap that must have originated far beyond the misty fjords of Scandinavia. To understand this source, we must first grasp the very essence of steel. Steel is an alloy of iron and carbon, and the entire secret lies in the correct proportion. Less than 0.3% carbon yields soft iron that bends easily. More than 2%, and you have brittle cast iron that shatters on impact. The ideal steel for a blade lies within a very narrow corridor between these values. 9th century European blacksmiths sought this balance almost blindly, and their main enemy was slag. These silicate impurities made the metal weak and heterogeneous, like dough with lumps of unsifted flour. The problem lay in the technology itself. The European bloomery furnace could not reach the melting point of iron, which is 1538 degrees Celsius. It only softened the ore into a porous sponge saturated with slag. All the subsequent work of the blacksmith was a heroic attempt to hammer out these impurities, folding and forging the metal repeatedly. Paradoxically, the famous patterns on many Viking blades are a visible trace of this imperfection. Their beauty is the beauty of their inherent defect, heterogeneous layers of metal welded together. The Ulfberht was created using an entirely different, almost heretical technology. It was an ingenious workaround. Instead of trying to purify solid metal, its creators melted it to a liquid state in a sealed clay crucible. At temperatures around 1600 degrees Celsius, a miracle occurred. Like clarified butter, all the heavy and pure material sank to the bottom, while lighter impurities and slag floated to the top. After slow, multi-day cooling, an ingot of perfectly pure, homogeneous steel with a precisely controlled carbon content remained inside the crucible. For 9th century Europe, this was science fiction. They had neither furnaces capable of consistently producing such temperatures, nor an understanding of the chemical process. When the English clockmaker Benjamin Huntsman rediscovered crucible steelmaking in the 1740s to produce high-quality clock springs, his invention became one of the catalysts of the Industrial Revolution. The creators of the Ulfberht preceded it by almost a millennium. If the Vikings did not possess this technology, yet had these swords, the conclusion is self-evident. They did not create the raw material themselves, they obtained it from somewhere. The steel for these blades was an imported commodity. It's like finding a cartridge casing in an ancient burial mound. When that ammunition is produced only in one factory on another continent. To find the source of this steel, we must leave European forges and travel far to the east, along the great trade routes of the Vikings themselves. The Ulfberht is a technological artifact from the future, and now our task is to find its true creator. The origins of this steel are to be found not on battlefields, but on trade routes. The Vikings were not only warriors, but also among the greatest traders of their time. For them, the Dnieper and Volga rivers were not obstacles, but highways. Their river routes, especially the Rus-Byzantine trade route leading to Constantinople, and the Volga trade route that reached the Caliphate itself, centered in Baghdad, were arteries connecting northern Europe with the wealthiest civilizations of the East. Southward, they carried what was not available there: furs, honey, amber, and slaves. In return, silk, spices, and most importantly for our story, silver flowed back. Arabian silver dirhams are found by archaeologists in tens of thousands. The largest hoard, the Spillings hoard, discovered in Sweden, weighed over 67 kilograms. Vikings often chopped these coins, using them not as currency, but as silver ingots by weight. This is irrefutable proof of the incredible scale of their trade. But silver was not the only valuable metal traveling north. It was in the East, specifically Central Asia, Persia, and India, where crucible steel technology not only existed, but had flourished for hundreds of years. In centers like Merv in modern-day Turkmenistan, its production was streamlined. There, this steel was known as Wootz or bulat. Local masters were unrivaled specialists in their craft, and from their steel, legendary Damascus blades, with their characteristic watery pattern, a visible sign of supreme quality, were forged. Their products were renowned throughout the Islamic world. The Vikings most likely did not purchase finished blades. Islamic laws often forbade the sale of weapons to infidels. It is far more probable that they imported the raw material, small ingots of finished crucible steel. These ingots, resembling gray hockey pucks, were an ideal commodity. Compact, incredibly valuable, and ready for further processing. It's like buying a Ferrari engine to install in your own chassis. And so the picture begins to emerge. We see an astonishing 9th century global supply chain, raw material from Central Asia, logistics handled by Scandinavian traders, and production in Rhenish workshops. The Vikings bring precious ingots of steel of the future from the East. Then in Europe, likely in specialized workshops along the Rhine, local blacksmiths, unaware of the raw materials production secret, but virtuosos of forging, transform these ingots into Scandinavian-style swords, stamping them with the mark of supreme quality, Ulfberht. Thus, the technological part of the story becomes clear. The Ulfberht is a product of early globalization, a synthesis of advanced Eastern metallurgy and sophisticated European swordsmithing. It was a business that crossed the boundaries of empires and religions, connecting Muslim traders, pagan Vikings, and Christian artisans. However, this solution raises a new, equally important question. Who precisely organized this complex and incredibly profitable business? The key to answering this question is forged into the blade itself. It's the name Ulfberht. And this name is not Scandinavian, it is Frankish, Old German. This fact indicates that the production center was most likely not in Norway or Sweden, but in the heart of the Carolingian Empire, along the banks of the Rhine, a region renowned for its weapon makers for centuries. And therein lies a great irony of history. The best Viking swords, their most formidable weapons, were forged by their sworn enemies, the Franks. Emperor Charlemagne and his successors issued strict edicts forbidding the sale of weapons to the northern pagans under penalty of death. But evidently the lure of exorbitant profits was stronger than the fear of imperial law. Metallurgical analysis revealed another surprise. It turned out that not all swords bearing this inscription were made from the legendary crucible steel. Many of them, especially later examples, were skillful fakes, forged from ordinary, much cheaper steel. This was the medieval equivalent of a fake designer handbag or counterfeit Swiss watch. From a distance, it looked the same. But in battle, the difference became fatal. The very existence of such widespread counterfeiting speaks volumes. Only something with immense value and prestige is counterfeited. This is convincing proof that Ulfberht was not merely a master's name, but a powerful brand, a symbol of the highest status. Researchers also noticed another detail. On the earliest and highest quality blades, the inscription appears as plus VLFBRH plus T, with crosses on both sides. On fakes, however, letters were often transposed or missing, a classic example of counterfeiting, much like modern Abibas sneakers instead of Adidas. It's possible that the copycat blacksmiths were illiterate and simply copied the symbols as ornamentation, making mistakes. They attempted to reproduce the appearance of the logo without understanding its meaning. All of this leads us to the most probable theory today. Ulfberht was not one person. It was the name of an elite Frankish weapons workshop, or perhaps an entire network of workshops, operating for 2 centuries, approximately from 850 to 1050 AD. Think of it as a medieval corporation. Its main asset was not blacksmiths' hammers, but exclusive access to imported raw materials and a trade secret comparable to the formula for Coca-Cola. Thus, Ulfberht was less a mythical genius at the anvil than a medieval Enzo Ferrari or Steve Jobs. It was a person or group of people who built a brand at the intersection of advanced technology, impeccable quality, and astute marketing. The story of this name is not one of magic, but of one of the most successful business ventures of the early Middle Ages. Yet, by the mid-11th century, this incredibly successful project wound down. The production of Ulfberht swords ceased as abruptly as it began. The answer to this question is not to be found in European forges. It lies thousands of kilometers from the Rhine, on the great Volga trade route. This artery, through which silver and steel flowed north, began to clog. The decline of the Samanid Emirate in Persia and political chaos in Central Asia cut off the flow. Supplies of the precious crucible steel simply dried up. Frankish weapon makers lost access to their secret ingredient, much like an electric car factory today might suddenly lose its supply of lithium. The secret of the Ulfberht wasn't lost in Europe, because it was never there to begin with. For the Frankish masters, Eastern steel was a kind of black box. They were virtuoso chefs who received a unique ingredient from a mysterious supplier. They knew how to brilliantly prepare it, creating masterpieces, but didn't know how to grow it. When supplies ceased, the dish permanently disappeared from the menu. The memory of these super-strong swords remained in sagas and legends, but the recipe for their creation was once again locked away in the East for centuries. So, to summarize, the Ulfberht sword is not magic or alien technology. It is a unique product of its era, born at the intersection of worlds. Its story is one of an early form of globalization, where Scandinavian entrepreneurship converged with Frankish craftsmanship and the advanced metallurgy of Central Asia. It was a triumph of international cooperation, 1,000 years before the term itself emerged. The history of the Ulfberht is not about a single genius, but about a complex and fragile international trade network that, for a brief historical moment, gave Europe technology from the future. The story of the Ulfberht is a powerful reminder that progress is not always linear. Entire layers of knowledge and technology can be discovered, utilized, and then completely lost for centuries when connections between civilizations crumble. Like the Antikythera mechanism or the secret of Roman concrete, the Ulfberht is a fragment of a lost world. This sword, now lying in a museum, makes us wonder, How many more such technological anomalies does the past hold? And what incredible levels of development could ancient societies have achieved, whose knowledge simply hasn't reached us? The Ulfberht is not just a piece of steel. It is material proof that history is far more complex and astonishing than we are accustomed to believing.